Hello and welcome to Thoughts in the Green Room with your host, Geoff Mays. This is the interview series, and this week in studio we have actor, writer, and public speaking coach, Gary Brennan. For those of you who don't know Gary, let's highlight some of his career. He has worked with director and writer Aaron Sorkin on Molly's Game. He has worked with the director from Driving Miss Daisy, Bruce Beresford, on a show called Flint. He, earlier in his career, was on Queer as Folk as a returning regular. Character's name was Rodney. He has also been on Murdoch Mysteries, and most recently, you may have seen him this past holiday season in Christmas for the Books, a Hallmark movie. Let's bring him into studio and talk with Gary Brennan. So, welcome, Gary. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Thank you so much for coming into Thoughts in the Green Room, the interview series. Hello to the audience out there. This is the man I just spoke about a few moments ago, and you get the privilege of joining us for our candid conversation. How's things going?
They're going well.
Good.
They're going great.
Glad to hear it. I got a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to get right into it.
Okay.
You are an actor,
Yeah.
you're a writer, and a public speaking coach. Is that correct?
I am.
I've got those things. Now, for the most part, I bring on artists who happen to be actors because, as you know, I'm an actor.
Mm-hmm.
So the majority of my guests so far have been actors. So I'm going to focus a little bit on that front. And wherever this takes us, it's going to take us, of course.
Sure.
That leads me to my first big question.
Okay.
Of the many things you do, what got you into acting? Why did you become an actor?
It keeps on changing.
Okay.
I think initially it was because I knew that I didn't want to work in an office.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to work for anybody. I was pretty good at communicating. I thought growing up, I thought at one point I'd be a journalist. I used to watch, Peter Kent back in the days recording from some exotic country, and I thought, oh, that's cool. And then there was a wonderful broadcaster, Canadian broadcaster, interviewer by the name of Brian Lanahan, and he used to interview all the Hollywood actors.
Okay.
And his job seemed really, really cool. And I thought, okay, that's what I want to do. And I grew up in Cape Breton Island, which is rife with talent, musical talent and acting talent and artists. And I mean, but I was never cut into that. I never availed myself to it. And I thought, well, being an actor, that's like getting a place on the space shuttle. It's not going to happen, right? It's like that's for other people. So I got into broadcasting. I came here and I studied at Ryerson in Toronto, and I noticed that there were people who were actors, and they weren't apologizing for being actors, as impractical as that would seem from anybody who doesn't do it, and sometimes for those of us who are in it.
Absolutely.
And I took a scene study class, and ultimately, what I loved about being an actor was that it is, when you're within a scene and you're communicating with somebody, it's the height of emotional intimacy. And you're not being told by a company, smile for the customer, or there wasn't anything that's the least bit contrived. You got to be who you were, warts and all, really, really vulnerably.
Yeah.
With someone else, and I found that incredibly intoxicating. And then when you're dealing with a well thought out play or well thought out, well written scene, then you come away changed in and I know this sounds actor schmactery, but you come away changed with a sense of relevancy. It creates empathy. You start to see people for who they are, rather than what you assume they are. And what I heard best explained is that, for instance, a theater, or why people go to movies, is that it allows people to absorb another point of view that they may not initially think of or agree with in a safe place, and maybe come away with a different point of view.
Right.
So it creates empathy, and that's ultimately why I now do it.
Right. Because, and if I'm hearing that correct, if I'm translating what I'm hearing correctly, being an actor, and I do agree with you on this, gives you that opportunity in a very broad stroke of a paintbrush here to help change the world.
Yeah, you get to show up and say, here's where we're together. Here's fundamentally how we're the same, and we can celebrate and see each other's differences, not in a threatening way, but as a way that just makes us distinct, but we can still relate. And in these times, it's not a bad idea to be able to see each other a little better.
Very much agreed. Now you said two things in that answer that really strike a chord with me. The first one was people being actors, showing up being vulnerable with their warts and all,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that to me is a very interesting concept, because a note that I used to consistently get as an actor is just be yourself,
Mm-hmm.
which seems contradictory when you think about it to the fact that you're putting on a character.
Mm-hmm.
Which, as an actor personally, that caused me a lot of confusion. I thought I am myself, but I'm playing a character. How can I be myself if I'm playing somebody else? And you can see the circle that spins, right?
Right.
So what's it like in reference to that idea of you need to be yourself to be a successful artist, to be a talented artist? What does that mean to you to be yourself while being another character?
The camera or an audience member sees who you are on a visceral level.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so that's where they actually see transparently whether you're being honest in the context of the scene or not. Because acting is living truthfully who you are
Yep.
under the given imaginary circumstances. So there's an element of who you are that's a requirement of how the scene's been written. And you may have to play a villain, even though in your life you choose not to see yourself as a villain and you always make the right decisions. There is an element inside of your own humanity that may not be as pretty as the other ones that we will only allow people to see. Because we have a public face,
Yeah,
right?
we do.
And we've learned to have a public face because that's the way we keep society intact. We do the right thing, regardless of how we feel. It's generally a good idea to do the right thing. People don't get hurt and society moves.
Yeah.
But there's an element inside all of us where, gosh, if we could only do what we really, really feel. And that's safe to do in a play because there are rules that keep everybody safe.
Right.
And so when you're an actor in the scene, it's not about you, it's about an element of you that you put into a character. So you're being a part of you under these imaginary circumstances which have rules around them so that everybody is safe.
That makes sense. Now I'm going to link that to something before I come back to that second point that
Okay.
you said earlier. Have you ever in your career as an artist been heard these words? Oh, so you must be a really good liar.
Yeah. In one form or another, yeah.
And I always find that an interesting thing about actors, because I believe that as an actor, it's definitely not being a liar.
Mm-mm.
Actors are masters of telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we don't believe the truth of the scene, if we're playing a villain, if we don't believe that we actually have to steal that money or murder that person or kidnap or whatever it is that the villain is doing, if we don't actually make the choice to believe that and make that our truth in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
the audience is going to see right through that
Yeah.
and go, that person's lying. They don't believe they're kidnapping somebody.
No,
This is
absolutely.
boring.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where we fall down as artists.
Yeah.
So being an actor has nothing to do with about putting on a pretense.
Mm-mm.
It's coming back to what you said for a second ago.
Yeah.
The ability to take an aspect of yourself and what would you really do in the given circumstances that's been written for you.
Yeah.
And believing in that moment.
Yeah.
It's a talent. It's a skill set that not a lot of people understand. And I think a lot of actors struggle to understand that before they start to recognize their own skill sets.
I think so. Yeah.
Now, from there, I want to come back to that first point you said. I said there were two things you said in your first answer.
Okay.
And I'm going to quote it as best I can. You said, the idea of becoming an actor, an artist, was like getting a spot on the space shuttle.
Yeah.
Those are strong words.
Yeah.
Very, very strong words.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a truth. Not in terms of becoming an artist of any form or fashion, but in becoming somebody who's recognized for your work,
Mm-hmm.
who has success because of your specific talent.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people out there who make Van Gogh look like a child's painter, right? Somebody who scribbles on a page who will never be known because they choose to do their art in private.
Yeah.
It's their hobby. We'll never know about that unknown Van Gogh. Just
Right.
like there are thousands of actors who will make our current stars look like child's play, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that idea of becoming a recognized actor is where the space shuttle seat is.
Mhm.
It's 1 in a million,
Mm-hmm.
or 1 in 223, or whatever they fit on the space
Right.
shuttle
Right.
when they get them going to the moon.
Right.
So with that idea, we have, as artists, a lot of inherent struggles,
Mhm.
right? it's not an easy task to pursue this craft. You know this, I know this.
Mm-hmm.
Many of my viewers out there know this because they too are artists.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious about what it is, if at all, do you do on the side while we're working for our spot on the space shuttle?
Right. Okay. So I floundered around for a long while trying to get that side hustle going.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up, I'm a lousy waiter. I think my contribution to Canadian rock and roll is I was working in a restaurant where Rush frontman Geddy Lee used to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he still does. And I gave him someone else's half-eaten sandwich in a doggy bag. And that was my contribution to Canadian rock and roll. And so, I mean, that's how good I am. So I realized, and so did my manager at the time, that I really wasn't good at what I was supposed to be doing. My head goes into remission. I can't double order or multitask. My brain doesn't work that way. So I got fired, and I was under stress of a 6-person deep bar. I'm not that guy.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'd fire you too if that was the case.
Well, it's funny the way that fate deals you the hand that you deserve, right?
Yeah.
We are the choices that we make.
Yes.
So I wandered into a company that ended up doing role playing, improv work.
Yep.
Through a particular structured coaching template that would help people on the other end of the phone, regardless of what industry they're in, the financial industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and we would role play a scenario, and then my job was to listen for their behavior according to a set of skills and reflect back my experience with them, and then coach them to how to be more effective in their communication skills. And that was great because I wasn't cashing out to a bartender at 3 o'clock in the morning after cleaning up some bar bathroom.
Yeah.
And it what started out as a survival job, and one that was better than working in a restaurant for me, because we've already covered that ground, ended up becoming, over the last 17 years, a vocation and a second profession. And a lot of the skills that I use as a public speaking coach and as a facilitator in workshops is all about what's happening truthfully in the moment, which is what exactly acting is.
Right.
So it's a way where I can use what I have learned as an actor, and I learn from coaching something that helps me with my acting. I mean, so the two marry well.
To marry there. Now you're jumping the gun for me, which is great. A beautiful segue about how do the day job and the chosen career job, the dream, the space shuttle spot, how do they relate? And I'm going to hold that for a second because in addition to that, you're also a writer.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah,
you are. Believe it or not.
Yeah, the hiccup was because I just narrowly almost being produced, and so I'm
so close.
I'm carrying a little bit of that with me.
So you're one step closer to the space shuttle spot because when you get produced, you got that much more recognition, right?
Yeah.
So you're also a writer, and I know that, and now everybody else does know that. So I want to bring that forward as one of the other, for lack of better terms in this case, one of your other side hustles.
Mm-hmm.
And you spoke a little bit about the coaching and acting and how they relate.
Mm-hmm.
Start off with the question, what's different from acting to writing?
That's a great question. I think I'll start with where they're similar.
Okay.
You get to work from an impulse when you're given someone else a script for an audition,
right?
And you know this,
yes,
so and those of you who are actors will know this. That you try to identify with what the writer wrote about the scene. How do you connect with the character on some level so that you've got to weigh in? When you're writing, it starts with the same thing. There's an impulse, or there's a pinch that makes you say, ouch, that says, this is a circumstance that I find I relate to. So the beginnings are the same.
All right, that makes sense.
Then you thread a story and when you're an actor, the written script is there, so you're structured, and all you do is you provide the humanity, and you end up on page 7, not because you ran out of words, but because the experience between two people brings you to page 7
Right.
organically, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
As a writer, you're threading through a story. And so you're going back and forth between the technical and making sure you're clear to where does the story go next. So you're kind of doing it blindly. And you're actually threading the story, and then everything has to make sense. And as an actor, you don't have to worry about making sense. You can only act the scene in front of you, right? Somebody else has to make sure that the narrative makes sense. But you as the writer, you've got to make sure that the narrative is clear, that it makes sense, that embodiment of your humanity comes out of it. And Aristotle's Poetics is used as the general template for writers, because he's a guy who came up with first act, second act, third act. And he also said, and he did it, I don't know the Latin, but you can't be emotional and logical at the same time. So the writer writes from a point of view of emotion, or at least I do, and then you have to go back and bring logic into it so that what you were saying emotionally actually can be communicated and absorbed by an audience, because it's not about you, it's about the impact on the audience and letting them see the humanity, but you have to do that logically.
Right.
I don't have to do that as an actor.
You just have to play the scene as an actor, or the pages in front of you, whatever that is. Whereas a writer, you play the pages, and after you've played the pages, you have to make sure they make sense in a larger context.
That's right. Because the logic, as an actor, the logic has already been incorporated into the emotion. The writer may have written emotionally, and then he goes back, or she goes back and provides the logic.
Right.
As an actor, we just show up and go, okay, the logic's already there, so I can just be available without worrying about the logic, and I provide that aspect. So as a writer, you have to be more of an architect, and you have to allow that you also don't know where the story's going to go, and not to be afraid of saying, well, what's the scariest thing if I were to say what happens next? I've got 3 or 4 choices for the character. What's the scariest thing to me?
Right.
And if you go in the direction of what's scary, you'll end up writing a story that's the real one that you need to write, that you hadn't even planned on. And that's where there's some nice things happen.
I think that's one of the other similarities, because as an actor, I believe that choice is, what scares me, what fear do I have, what's the challenge point within these 6 pages I'm reading, these 7 pages I'm reading, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Finding that fear for yourself, and then translating that into character as appropriate.
Yeah.
So there's a great similarity there. That's interesting. So we've got three major professions, right?
Yes.
The acting, public speaking coach, and the writer, and they all mesh together. You spoke loosely at this point about some of the similarities. Do these 3 things live separately within you, or do these 3 things come together to bind you and make you?
I think they're all woven together, if to use your words, then to bind and make. They all come out of the one pipe. There's the writing, the acting, and coaching is all about what's really, really happening in the moment between 2 people, and who dares to live in that moment.
Right.
And as a coach, the kind of work that we do, because this is how you and I met about
absolutely
12 years ago doing this work.
That. Yes.
If I can help somebody communicate honestly and respectfully without taking away someone's dignity, but to be honest about helping somebody authentically, that comes from the same place of one's humanity that actors represent through a story that's written. That a public speaking, a presenter who walks on the deck to the podium and has an audience in front, the idea is to create a relationship and empathy with the audience so that they'll be opened up to an experience that can have them change their point of view for the betterment.
Right.
So they all dovetail.
Right. Absolutely. That idea that the most common or most popular in my mind, Tony Robbins, can't get up there and BS his way through a 2-hour seminar. He has to be finding the reality of his own vulnerability to connect to the audience, so that they'll be willing to receive the message that he believes in, that he imparts, that his followers also buy into, and subsequently help him to produce a living off of that. Whereas we're doing the same thing as actors, as artists, right? We're trying to find that vulnerability that empathy that drives into and connects to an audience.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll say, wow, that was a phenomenal show. I feel more empowered, or I feel recognition towards somebody I would have never thought about before, fill in the blank,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
We're finding our vulnerability to present an empathy to draw people together. And all three of your crafts are allowing you to do that simultaneously.
Yes. That's right.
That I've never thought about it that way. As you've mentioned, you and I are. I'm also a corporate coach, and I've met this way, and I've never thought about the work we do that way on that level.
Mm-hmm.
I see connections and similarities all the time.
Right.
But that specific one, that's a new one for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And recognize that when you're out there looking for that motivational speech, when you're out there trying to find the thing that's going to empower you and take you out of a slump, ladies and gentlemen, when you're watching whoever it is you watch or feel motivated by, maybe take a moment to reflect and recognize what level of empathy or vulnerability is being connected to, because maybe that is the real source that you can drive yourself without the additional speech when you're having one of those low days.
Yeah. Nice.
Now, shifting topics a little bit.
Okay.
I'm going to keep it somewhat in the same ballpark. You're a family man, yes?
I am.
Yeah. Children?
Yeah. I have a son who's 20. I have a daughter who's now turning 17.
Okay. Now, this to me is absolutely amazing, and I say that because one, raising children and interacting with a partner for the length of time to get to the point when you make that decision and then you actually raise kids, that's a feat well beyond my scope.
Okay.
I obviously don't have my own kids. I live through my brothers and my sisters and their nieces and my nieces and nephews. But
Sure.
I can always give them back.
Yeah, you're the uncle who fills the kids up with sugar and says, "We've had a great day. Here, they're yours now."
Exactly.
Right? Okay. Yeah.
That's
okay.
me.
Yeah, I look out for people like you.
But I say it amazes me because I truly do believe raising the next generation is a feat
Mm-hmm.
for anybody out there who's doing it. Congratulations to parents. They are a godsend. But it amazes me even more because I recognize, and where this is coming back to, getting a spot on the space shuttle. We struggle.
Mm-hmm.
We worry about the roof over our own heads and the food that we've got to put on the table for us.
Mm-hmm.
You made the choice to put the food on the table for others as well as yourself.
Yeah.
And the roof over your head and somebody else. That's taking on a lot, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like being a parent in this specific profession? And I say that this specific profession because I've got a lot of friends in the public sector and the private sector, and they're making money proverbially hand over fist. And
Mm-hmm.
they don't really need to think, as long as they stay within their budget. They don't
Yeah.
really need to think about it because their paycheck's coming in 2 weeks,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Our paycheck doesn't come in 2 weeks all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
It's manic, and I first want to say that being an actor or whatever it is we choose to do. I mean, that nobody held a gun to my head and said,
we made the
"Gary, you have
choice.
to be an actor."
Yeah, it's our choice.
So, depending on what levels of success come to you, whether that gets sustained, whether there's missed opportunities that have an impact on you financially because you're not making money. I mean, that's a reality. And so it does become a juggle. And there are times when it's very, very stressful. And the money that you expected to make gets canceled. But also in coaching, we've had contracts lined up where we go, okay, great, we're going to be fine for July. And then the client moves the agenda. And all of a sudden it's, wait a minute, someone took my cheese again. Where's
the money for July?
Where's the money for July? So that's part of the gig. I'm really, really lucky. I'm married to a wonderful woman and actress by the name of Sharon McFarlane. And what helps is that because we're both actors, we at least can empathize with each other. We try to find work in different areas and build on momentum when we can. And so, in my particular circumstances so far, it's been a real challenge, right? Some days are good and some days are bad. Bryan Cranston has a great book out to read, and his dad was an actor. And one day they would build a swimming pool, and the next day they'd fill it in. I mean, they either could afford to put it in the ground, and then other times they didn't have the budget for the chemicals. What keeps me going is that I believe that my kids are going to be at a crossroads in their life where they're going to want to do something that's really, really meaningful to them,
Mm-hmm.
and there will be 1,000 reasons offered why they shouldn't.
Right.
And I want it to be able to sit with them when they come to that crossroads and say, you know, there's all kinds of ways you can live your life. Live it so that whatever it is you choose is deeply meaningful to you, and have faith that you are capable of enjoying an enriched life that may be rewarded on one level or another materially. My son is really interested in photography, so he's studying photography. That means he's going to have to go out and chase some clients and develop. But he comes from a place where he's really good, and to take the other path, there's no fault in that.
Right.
But I didn't want to get to the end of my life and go, oh, I should have, would have, could have. And I wanted to be that example to my kids. And as much as there are financial realities involved, we have a very, very close-knit family. And my kids throw me when they say, I really like what we do. And it's taught me as a parent that what I think I need to do for them and things that I would like to be able to do for them, they get other things that are making them phenomenal people.
That is awesome to hear.
So
I can hear the pride. I can see it in your face. You've got a wonderful generation of kids that you've raised, and that's fabulous.
You do it by braille sometimes. I mean, they'll come out of situations where, oh man, I pooched that one, but anyways, they're forgiving.
There's no guidebook with them, right? There's no script that we got to learn.
Yeah.
We just go.
Yeah.
It's an improv class.
It ain't karaoke. No, that's right.
It's an improv
It's totally
class
improv.
for the rest of your life, the rest of their life.
Yeah.
I think that what you just said sums up a general philosophy that I have. And I want to share it with yourself, with the world. I think you said it, but in its really base and simple form, live life without regret.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not here long enough to worry about what we didn't do. So make sure that we do what we want to do, right?
Yeah.
And have fun doing it along the way. And there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, and you're maybe like, wow, that one was a whew.
Yeah.
Don't want to do that again,
No.
but don't regret having done it. And be able to regale the story about the time when, whatever that when is. And I've got enough of those, but there's not a single regret in it. And I think you summed it up well in the way that you want to translate and impart that information to your kids, and in general for the audience out there, that imparting to the next generation. I think that pretty much brings us to a close. I'm going to ask I've got one other question.
Okay.
And I'm gonna look for challenge you for brevity on it.
Okay. Oh, okay. Nice.
You know, when we take a look at some of the questions I've asked and some of the thoughts that have been generated by the conversation we're having, what do you feel life has taught you? What's like that one kernel that has given you this is the way I choose to live?
I think it's first taught me resilience, because there are lots of things that I work toward where I don't get the result that I want. I get the intrinsic result,
right?
You know, that's self-rewarding, but I don't get the business tangible result that I want. So it's taught me resilience, just to keep on going, to believe in things. It's taught me about convictions and to follow through. There was a wonderful man here in Toronto years ago who was a makeup artist, but an actor in his own right in the 40s and the 50s. His name was Jack Medhurst. Okay. And he worked at Ryerson as a makeup instructor, but he was so much more than that. He was a wonderful director. And he used to adjudicate actors during different play festivals, and he would say, have the courage of your convictions. And I think that it's the courage of your convictions that defines you to the world and allows you then to see the world and be willing to change, because when you've got convictions, you're going to bump up against challenges, and if you're open enough not to be threatened by the challenge but to really give it some time, your convictions will also change and mature. So it's resilient and courage of your convictions that I think this has taught me.
I think that's a great lesson to have. I think it's a great lesson that you've imparted, and hopefully some of you out there may take that to heart. That's a phenomenal note to wrap this up on.
Okay.
Gary, I want to thank you for coming in.
Oh, pleasure.
Out there, ladies and gentlemen, this is the fabulously talented Gary Brennan, who you've just listened to converse with me. These are your thoughts from the green room on the interview series, and I will see you here in a couple of weeks with our next guest.